Hello, I'm going to talk about sober dating today, or dating in recovery. I got married the other week. Um, so I do know a little bit about what I'm talking about, and I've also made lots of mistakes. So hopefully that will save some people repeating those mistakes. Because I hadn't dated, ever really. Um, in my drinking days, I used to kind of just fall into relationships. Like I'd just end up in a relationship and I'd be like, I don't feel like I really chose this. I don't feel like I was ever courted and dated and taken on dates. Maybe when I was very young, like when I was 16, 17, with my first boyfriend, he used to take me on dates. But yeah, I never sort of made the conscious decision to get into a relationship or get married and go through the whole dating process. And I think when I started out, I think I actually believed that was a bit of an old-fashioned approach, but then I started to see the value in a bit more of a traditional approach, which I'll get into. But yeah, basically I spent a long time on my own. I went through recovery, rehab, everything like that. And then somebody suggested to me, oh, why don't you get on Tinder? And I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm not interested in meeting anyone anyway, you know. But eventually I uploaded a profile on Tinder, and I started chatting to some people sort of just out of curiosity. After that whole debacle, which it was, I decided that I needed to learn how to date. All right, so I found some dating channels on YouTube, and I started to get more interested in the more traditional approach, like let the guy take you out and then you go home afterwards. And it was like, this is revolutionary. That's what I ended up doing. And that's how I found my person, by having like very strong boundaries and not getting too involved straight away. First of all, what I would say, if you're starting out, you have to actually ask yourself, like, are you ready for dating? If your sobriety is kind of rocky and it's like, well, you know, hopefully I won't end up drinking on this date, like you're not ready. You need to have a stable period of sobriety to where you're like, yeah, I see myself as a non-drinker. I see myself as a non-user. I mean, especially with drinking, right? Because you go on a date and it's expected that you're going to have a drink. It's not like you're going to start snorting lines on a normal date, you know. You might do, but like I would say it's different with alcohol because it's so socially acceptable and expected, you know. So especially if you're an ex-drinker, you really need to have some sober time under your belt. And it's not because, you know, you're not healthy enough to have a relationship or whatever. What I mean is, like, it needs to be like you've come to see yourself as a sober person. You've experienced yourself over a long period of time as a sober person. You know, and then you can go on a date after that. You know, have a think about who you are. When I was younger, in my drinking days, when I was younger, I was kind of, you know, I was brought up with a lot of internal shame and a lot of sexual repression, I would say. And when I got drunk, the opposite would come out. So I'd kind of turn into like this sexual, like, mess, you know, seductress, right? Because that was my shadow side. That was the side that was being suppressed, right? And I had to have booze in order to get into that character, you know. And when I started to date when I was sober, I kind of, there was part of me that wanted to be like that, right? And it's like, it's just not who I am. It's just not. Like, I'm very prude, I'm very traditional, and like I've come to love that about myself, right? And so I had to kind of accept that. It's like, you don't need to try and seduce anybody. Like, you don't need to act like that. Like, that's not the real you, you know? And also, because I'd been in a long relationship where I constantly felt like I was in the wrong, quite often I was, I had a lot to prove. I had a lot to prove to myself about what a good person I am. And I had a lot to prove to men about what a great partner I am. And that ended up, that led to me being treated like a doormat for a little bit, which I'd never really experienced. It didn't last long. It's not, a doormat is not my default position. And, you know, I quickly got over that one. But I had to right size myself. I was trying to go in the opposite direction, where I'd been seeing myself as like a perpetrator in a relationship. It was like, well, now I'm going to try and turn myself into the downtrodden victim, you know. It was like, okay, now I've experienced that, how about somewhere in the middle, you know, which is what I have now. So on a practical level, how do you tell your date that you're a non-drinker? I have a friend who's in recovery as well, and she has kind of, she worries a bit about, how do I break it to the guy that I'm in recovery? And I take more of a practical approach, like, okay, they probably need to know I'm not drinking because they probably offer to buy me a drink, right? So what I tended to do was, I kept it charming. And if a guy asked me out for a drink, I would say, well, I actually don't drink, but I'm happy to come along and watch you have one, right? And most of them would be like, okay, great. A small percentage of them would be like, why do you not drink? You know, and then it's like, all right, I'm not going to overshare. I don't need to overshare. You know, I would say something like, oh, you know, it's not for me. It disagrees with me. I'm allergic to it. I used to drink too much when I was younger. It's just healthier for me this way that I don't, you know, just something quite casual like that. You don't need to like overshare. Why? Again, if you're kind of feeling like you owe the world an explanation as to why you're not drinking and you feel less than because you're in recovery, you feel like you have to share that because that makes you less than, you're probably not ready to date, right? A lot of the time, you know, I'd go on dates where the other person would be like, oh, it's really refreshing having somebody, going on a date with somebody who doesn't drink, and then they wouldn't drink as well. You know, quite often there's a positive response to it. But being sober, it's cool, it's the new thing, you know. A lot of people are going sober for health reasons. You know, it doesn't have to be so pathologized. You know, I'm doing it for my mental health, so it's for health reasons. So it doesn't need to be so like, oh, you know, I used to be an alcoholic. Like, I don't even really use that word until later on. I might start using that word, but yeah, it's not really necessary. But you have to keep a balance of, you know, being open about who you are and where you've been versus kind of, you know, like oversharing or just hiding something completely. Like, you have to be honest, but without the groveling and the apologizing for who you are thing. You don't need to do that. And also, it's good to decide, are you okay with dating a drinker? Like, how are you going to feel when that person gets drunk and acts differently? How are you going to feel if you can taste and smell the alcohol on their breath? So personally, I mean, if you're an alcoholic, right, you can probably spot them. It's like having a radar. I did not date guys who had a bad relationship with alcohol. Like, to me, it oozes out of people. I can spot it within, I mean, I can spot it even before they drink. right? I can just tell. It's a certain personality, it's a certain shiftiness. So I actually didn't have any experience of dating anybody who had a drinking problem. All of them were sort of well-balanced, well-rounded people. But, you know, moderate drinkers, they're still going to smell of alcohol. Their behaviour is still going to get affected by booze. And also, as an ex-drinker, you can find yourself kind of vicariously living through somebody who is a drinker. So kind of like, well, I mean, it happened to me. Somebody who I was dating, I'd go and choose a nice bottle of wine for him to drink while he's at my house, and it's a little bit too close to the bone. So while I didn't want to drink somebody, I didn't want to date somebody who was in recovery. That's not what I wanted to have our context based upon, for various reasons, which I might go into in a bit. But you know, I was happy to date a moderate drinker, but just so happens that my husband doesn't drink at all. And that's actually better for me. I never get to smell it on his breath. You know, we never have it in the house. He never talks about booze. It's like, it's a non-issue. It's just a non-issue. And the reason he doesn't drink is different to mine. He's not had a problem with it. He just chooses not to. And that's actually perfect. How to date then? So just made some notes here on healthy dating. Create as much balance as possible and keep it appropriate. Remember, we love dopamine. Okay. So like I said, at first, when I went into things without intention, kind of out of curiosity on Tinder, and then it was kind of like, oh, like, this is a little bit exciting actually. And it got the dopamine flowing, and it was like, send, you know, and then you wait for the next text to come back. I got in that loop a little bit. It didn't last long. I realized how unhealthy it was, but I have been caught up in that loop. That is something I see people carry on doing for years. You know, online relationships, cyber relationships, texting, messaging, anything where you're not using your real voice and there's no eye contact, and it's very much fantasy based and very much premeditated what you're going to say before it comes out. You know, because obviously there's a delay on text. It's an unnatural kind of just addictive way of doing it, that doesn't lead anywhere. So, excuse me, I'd advise anyone, but you know, especially people like us who loves a bit of dopamine, loves a bit of drama, just stay away from the online thing. So it's like, if you're on a dating app, I met my husband on a dating app, right? We spent like 5 minutes chatting on the app, and then within a couple of days we were on a date, and then we had each other's phone numbers. We didn't spend a long time chatting on the app. He's local to me, which I changed the parameters on the dating app. I took it right down. I wanted it in a 5-mile radius so that I could actually have a proper relationship. And, you know, I removed certain other filters, including the age. But anyway, I digress. So it was quickly brought into the real world, right? He wanted to meet me, he was interested in me. So he invited me on a date, like within a couple of days. Like, we weren't chatting for ages. So there was no dopamine. There was a real sort of, yes, like feeling positive about meeting him. You know, a real looking forward to it, not anything to do with brain chemicals, you know? So, okay, but just rewind from that. As I was dating different people, and I had a look at some dating coaches, this is something that is, I think is very alien, particularly to English women, but dating multiple men at a time. Hear me out. So When I say dating, I mean meeting up for a coffee date. So it was like, so I would be on the dating app, have my parameters like whittled right down to a very small radius, and I would get, you know, every few days, every week or whatever, a bit of back and forth with local guys, and then they would ask me on a date and I would go and have a coffee with them, right? 9 times out of 10, I knew by the end of that coffee date that that person wasn't for me. A few of them I had a second date with. So I didn't need to be, it was only a coffee date. So you don't need to resign yourself to just one person. Like, you just meet up with them. It's like, okay, yep, like, I get on with you, second date, like, I don't get on with you, like, probably won't meet up again. Like, just, and it's a little bit of a conveyor belt situation, but it just meant that I didn't get attached to anyone. I didn't put all my eggs in one basket. You know, it was like, I'm just meeting people, that's all. You know, there's no hanky-panky going on. Like, there's literally nothing wrong with going and meeting somebody for a coffee and then the next day meet someone else for a coffee. There's nothing wrong with that. So that's what I mean about dating multiple men. I left the date within an hour or two as well. So again, it's like, just, this is keeping it appropriate. For somebody you've just met, why would you be chatting away for hours and hours and hours? If you're drunk, maybe that's what you do. But, you know, in the day, coffee, there's no booze involved for either of you. It's appropriate to not chat away, sit there for 6-7 hours talking. It's appropriate to leave that coffee shop after an hour or maybe 2 if you're getting on really well. So it's just, it's keeping the appropriateness, you know? So we're just keeping it dopamine free, excitement free, you know? And the excitement should come a bit later on when you're really getting to know that person and finding out what they're into, you know? Sex. Like I said, I do not advise having sex on the first date. Okay, here's something that I didn't know. I only made this mistake once, really, but right, so I read Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, and it changed my life because I realized that men and women fall in love in different ways. Men tend to not fall in love with you if you sleep with them too early, which is like, what? Because we are the opposite. But obviously it's not real love, but we feel like we fall in love with men who we sleep with. We get attached to them. So as I got more into this kind of concept, I discovered that just basically wait as long as possible. So, you know, I didn't fall into that trap again. I dated lots of men, coffee dates or, you know, meals, nothing untoward. I was courted, right? Because I didn't jump into bed with any of them. I didn't get attached to any of them. So I kept my marbles, I kept my wits about me, like, oh no, we're not a match, whatever. When I met my husband, that was the first time I really clicked with somebody and thought, hey, I just want to be around this guy. And he felt the same way. I spoke to him about it and I said, you know, I believe in waiting for sex because it doesn't tend to work out very well when you do it too early, you know. And we had that conversation and he agreed. And I think he would have probably gone along with if I'd have said I wanted to do it. But, you know, we had a conversation about it and we held off for as long as we could. Maybe it could have been a bit longer, but the point is, before I had sex with him, I knew that he was really into me. He made me feel at ease. There was no drama. He was showing up. He was making consistent effort. He was talking about long-term plans, you know, and it was completely safe for me to do it with him, and nothing in the relationship changed. In fact, it got stronger. There was no weirdness or me getting too attached or too clingy, like none of that. You know, so it was the right time. I would say read John Gray's book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, or just trying to educate yourself about how you might think you're being kind of seducey and like, you know, liberated and free, like free love, having sex straight away, do whatever you want. Like, it doesn't come across like that to men. It comes across quite differently, and it actually lowers your self-esteem 9 times out of 10 if you're doing that, because it's still approval seeking, and that's what the guy experiences it as. Like, he'll still have sex with you, but he'll see that it's approval seeking behavior. And I really apologize so much to any men who are listening to this and think that I'm a massive sexist. And I'm aware that guys can fall for women as well in the same way. It's just more common with women. From what I understand, what tends to happen to guys is that they're just dissatisfied. They're dissatisfied with their relationships, because if women sleep with them too early, they feel like, well, if she is going to do that with me, she would do that with any guy. So is she really that into me, or is that just what she does? And it's just not a satisfying situation to be in. Please correct me if I'm wrong. What I would say as well, as you go along dating, let's call it just meetups, you'll kind of get an idea of what works for you and what doesn't. In the end, I was extremely conscious and deliberate about what I was looking for, and I decided that I wanted a marriage with all the trimmings, all the tradition, and I mean, I wanted the traditional gender roles. You know, I still wanted to work, but I wanted to have it where if we decided to have a child, I'd be able to give up work. You know, maybe that's not for you. Maybe you definitely don't want any more kids. Maybe you, maybe you just want a long-term partner, or you just want to live together. Yeah, decide what context you want. You know, and I also decided that it shouldn't take that long for me to get that. When I met my future husband, you know, we were married within, were we married within 18 months or 2 years? It was a quick turnaround, and it's not because any of us rushed into it. It's because we were both extremely clear about what we wanted, and you know, we were both quite strategic in getting that, and we were clearly a good match. We had some problems which we worked out, and there's no drama. I think a lot of it is to do with the fact that none of us drink, so there's no big emotions, you know. Everything's relatively peaceful, and there was no reason for us to wait to get married, you know. I've put here, decide what language or collective framing you want. This is an interesting one. Okay, so for example, maybe you are a Christian and you want to be with another Christian. Like, it's important, right? Maybe you're the kind of person who's kind of into therapy and you want like more of a therapy jargon language between both of you. Like, there's lots of different bubbles and languages that people speak. And I mean in terms of like the vocabulary, the vernacular, you know. For example, I have a friend who's in a relationship. Both of them have therapy. Both of them hold their own personal growth at like the highest thing. They're not married, right? Me and my husband, it's our marriage that's kind of like the highest, like overarching framing of the relationship. It's like, well, is this good for the marriage? Their thing, my friend and her partner, their thing is like, well, is this good for my personal growth? So their language is very therapy orientated. You know, they will talk about attachment styles, the drama triangle, all of that. Like they bring that into the relationship. Whereas my husband and I, we do that sometimes, but we keep more of a balanced approach. We trial lots of different languages. So we take it with more of a pinch of salt, is what I think it means. So if you have like one person in the relationship who's very therapy jargon orientated, so like, well, that is your anxious attachment style coming out. And the other person's like, I don't use this language, like I don't really know what that means, so I can't defend myself. Like that's not going to work very well. That's what I mean about like using the same language. Decide on what personal framing you want. So what do you want for yourself in a relationship? I had a long think about this, and I really wanted to be adored by someone. I'm just being honest. I wanted to be their number one choice out of all the women in the world. That's how I feel with my husband. So I got what I wanted. But I also wanted to be somebody's strength, somebody's peace. I wanted to have the man's back, really have his back. I wanted to have that experience of being a good wife to someone. And, you know, that's something that I work on. But I know he feels like I have got his back. So it's like your personal goals in the relationship, you know. Have a think about those, and like I said, they may change as you go through. It's just good to sort of keep sight of all these things, and you can be as conscious as possible instead of just falling into these situations and situationships, you know. Decide on what setup you'd like. Do you want to be like more of a traditional household where the man goes to work and the woman stays at home? That's what I wanted. I still wanted to carry on working, but I wanted to be at home. I didn't want to be super focused on my career as much as the man. And it's personal preference. It's not about saying one's better, one's right, one's wrong. It's like, it's personal preference. Like, just be honest. Like, if you don't want to work at all, you want to have babies, be honest with yourself at least, you know. And it's okay. There's plenty of people out there who want the same thing. Do you want 50-50? Are you like, no, I'm not giving up my career. You know, I want to carry on being ambitious. Maybe you want to do that, but you don't want to earn more than the man. Or maybe you're okay with earning more than the man. Like, it's just being on the same page with these things and trying to discern what the other person wants and having conversations about that sort of thing, you know. I put that out straight away when I met my husband. You know, we talked about everything. We had a lot of chat on our first date, and you know, I said, like, if I have any more kids, I would really like to give up working, because last time I found it extremely stressful and I couldn't cope. And he was like, oh, sounds good. So, you know, put those things out there and see if you're compatible. Decide what relationship dynamic you want. Do you want to be taken care of? Are you looking for a daddy? Are you looking for an equal partner? Are you looking for a gender neutral relationship? Are you looking to be submissive in the relationship? Like, everybody falls into patterns. The patterns that you tend to fall into, is that what you want? Like, you can consciously make a decision to change it. I have a tendency to fall into a pattern where I feel like the bad guy, right? And I wanted to change that. Now, don't get me wrong, this marriage that I'm in that's very healthy, because I have such strong program in that area, I can veer towards feeling like the bad guy and acting like the bad guy as well. You know, the thing, it creates a feedback loop. But it's like, not like, that's not, it doesn't have to go that way, because there are other things in the relationship, because I'm adored, right? Because I'm focused on my own personal growth and being a good wife to him, because I have the marriage, so I have something bigger than me to focus on. Is it good for the marriage? It keeps me from going into that bad guy mode. It sort of balances it out. So have a look at your patterns and tendencies. I did want someone to take care of me, but that's not all I wanted. I wanted somebody to take care of me, but I also wanted to be an equal partner. And I mean, where we can have equal adult conversations, and my opinion is just as valid as his. So where we have some traditional stuff going on, where I do like to be taken care of sometimes. You know, I do like to stay at home more, and for him to earn most of the money. We also have some dynamics that are not as traditional. So we both have an equal voice in the relationship. That's the way he wants it as well. He values my opinion. You know, and he likes to be taken care of as well. He needs that from me as well. So it's like, you can mix it up, you know, but there's things to think about. When I say, do you want a daddy? So that's like, you know, a dominant figure who makes all the decisions. Like, if you want that, it doesn't mean that you only, like, that's the only thing that you can have in the relationship. You know, there are other dynamics that can come into play as well. It's very complicated. That's why it's good to meet lots of different people. Don't get attached to them by sleeping with them or texting them too much. Energy exchange. So this is about thinking what you're good at and what you need in somebody else that might be a bit of a deficit. So like, what do I bring to the table? What do I expect him to bring to the table? Or her, right? Like, you might know that you're a very nurturing person, right? That, like, that's what you're bringing, is like nurturing, physical affection, whatever. And you might want somebody who's good with talking through conflict, for example. Maybe you're not that great at that. You want somebody who's going to be patient enough with you to kind of teach you how to handle conflict better. So it's thinking about what your strengths and weaknesses are, you know. Something else that I did, because I went through a bit of a wobbly phase where I was like maybe I have nothing to offer, or like I was feeling full of shame, you know, like, what, like, should I tell them that I'm an alcoholic? And it was like, no, okay, write everything down that you value about yourself that a man could not get from anywhere else. And it was like, what I was perceiving as my weaknesses were actually my strengths, you know. Oh, I'm, you know, have been through all this stuff, and it's given me wisdom and a certain balance and like ability to empathize with people that I didn't have before, and a certain humility, things like that, you know, like what's your unique selling points, like write those down. And I think they're often based on like, you know, adversity, you know, bad stuff that you've been through. I can't think of anything else to say right now, but I'm sure there's a lot. Yes, let me know what you think in the comments. I might do a part 2 of this video. I do feel like it's important. I feel like it's important to cultivate balance and appropriateness. You know, if you're still rocky, or you're still like, I can't date without drinking, just give it a little bit more time. And for me now, I mean, it ended up like when I was dating, it just became so normal to not drink. It was just so normal in the end, you know, and I hope you get there too. Thank you.